everyone, this is Tim Jennette the Metal Meeple, and in this video we're taking a look at Wombat Rescue, published by Eagle-Gryphon in 2015, designed by Matt Wolf. It's a 2 to 4 player game, takes about an hour to play, depending on the number of players, and essentially you play a mama wombat on one side of the board and your 4 babies are lost and you're trying to find them. The first player to go and get their 4 babies in return is the winner, except it has a unique movement system in which you have to eat food, poop it out, and use that as a smell radius, because when you're in your smell radius you can move as far as you want in a straight line. Otherwise you're pretty much just moving one space and it might be random. So let me show you how it plays. We'll come back and I'll tell you what I think. So here we have Wombat Rescue set up for 2 players. We got blue and we have yellow. Each player is going to receive a mother wombat. You're going to get 4 baby wombats. The mother wombat goes over here on this home space, which has a little home icon. The babies will go on these 4 spaces over here, which have a little baby icon. We'll show you that in a minute. And lastly, you're going to get a ton of poop cubes. Yes, wombats apparently poop in cubes. This is thematic. I had to look this up because I was not for sure and I thought it was interesting, but it is true. They poop in cubes. Pretty cool. Very thematic. Once the players get their items, you're going to also have this player board that you place in front of you, and it shows your mouth and then 3 digestion tracts. Basically, food goes flying across the table. Now, food comes into your mouth, and then I feel like I'm teaching anatomy. Food comes into your mouth, and then it goes through your body and then poops out. More on this later, but essentially each player is going to start with a black cube in the middle of their digestion tract. Each player past the first is also going to receive one of these up here, just to kind of offset the player turn order. And then finally, the last player in turn order is going to receive the dingo. The dingo is an AI controlled, basically, thing that's going to run around and send wombats back to the home space. Now the idea of the game, that player is going to place his dingo on one of these dingo spots. The idea of the game is you want to move your wombat across the board to one of your babies, bring them all the way back to home. Once you do that, once you grab a baby, he goes in your little pouch, and then once you get home, you rescue him. The first player to rescue all 4 of their baby wombats is the winner. Let me show you these boards first, though. They have very small icons, so the camera range might be a little hard to pick it up, but you got a little baby wombat. We put the food out. The food is drawn from this bag. There are 3 types of food. There's green, orange, and black. Essentially 1, 2, and 3 points, and we'll come back to that in a minute on why they are worth different amounts. The dingo has its spot on the board. It has like a little dingo here, and there's also, you'll notice some icons I don't have anything on. Those are boulders, and that's one of the optional rules, and I'll explain that later. At this point, you're pretty much ready to begin. The first player is going to go, and you have 3 phases to your turn. The first phase is movement, in which you're going to move around. You have up to 3 movement points to spend. You don't have to spend them all. The second phase of your turn is digestion, in which the food's going to move through your track, your digestion track. And the third phase of your turn is the cleanup phase, in which you might replace some of these food if there's tons gone, and we'll show you that. And then lastly, if you control the dingo, you're going to get to roll a die, and he's going to move. So let me explain how movement works and smell areas work. Now, smell areas, zoom in right in on that cube, perfect. Smell areas are once you poop a cube, so pretty much you're not using them during the turn. Once you finally poop a cube, it lands in the space that you're in. It creates a smell area of a distance of 2. So from here it's 1, 2, on the side 1, 2, and it makes a giant circle basically. Now you can put extra cubes in there if you stay in the same spot and poop in the same spot. That's going to allow you to extend up to 2 or to 3 and then 4. So you can have a 4 area radius, and that's the maximum you can have, but it's probably best to spread them out. That way the smell areas overlap and you get more of like an oblong shape or whatever, however you want to do it. That's what a smell area is. Now a smell area is going to allow you to move in a straight line during your movement. So if you start your movement point, essentially your action point for your movement, within your smell area, so this is 2 spaces, I'm only 1 space away, I'm within it. I can move in a straight line as far as I want, as long as I never leave the smell area. So in this case, if I moved to here, I would stop because it only extends to here and here. If I had another poop cube here, and I was here, or here on that green, I could pretty much move all the way to here. Once you leave your smell area, you stop. So 1 movement point is going to get me to there. Now that's 1 move. The second type of move that you can do, once you're out of your smell area, you have to do what's called a special move, but only in certain cases. One, if you're next to a food, I did make a little bit of a mistake here. Anytime you're doing a move and you end outside of your smell area, you stop. So for instance, here, you would stop, there if you moved in a straight line like this. The second thing is if you move into a space that contains pretty much anything other than your own stuff, you have to stop. So if you stop in a space that has a food, or if you stop in you'll stop in, obviously if you run into the dingo, which you probably wouldn't do, you would stop if you run into another mamba wombat, except for you can push them. So if there was a mamba wombat here, you can push them up to 2 spaces. So I can push and then push, as long as you're still within your smell area. Obviously, in that case, I would stop there anyway. Or if you hit the edge of the board, yada yada. So let's just pretend this food cube was not there, and I moved from here and I went all the way to here. That's 1 movement point. Now the second ththing you can do, like I said, is a special movement, in which case, if you are adjacent to a food cube, say this was up here somewhere, if you were right here and you're not in the smell area anymore, but you're adjacent to a food cube, you can immediately move 1 space into that place and pick up the food cube. That is one special type of movement. The second special type of movement is if you're adjacent to a baby wombat of your color, you can shift into that space and pick up your baby wombat. Now, those are pretty much the final movement, is if you are out of your range. Let's see. Here's the food cube. If I moved 3 spaces, that's outside my range. Now, I'm not adjacent to any food cubes, so the last type of movement you can do is a wander. Now, there's a wander deck here, in which basically they have one of 2 icons. You shuffle it up and you flip over a card. Do you have this icon or this icon next to you? In this case, we have just the plains, so you would have to move that space. Now that costs your action 1 of your movement points. At that point, if you moved into a smell area, you can continue to move like normal. Otherwise, you're going to have to look for a special, which are not next to any food. So in this case, we're going to wander again. As our second movement, we get it. And now we have an option. We can choose which one of those we want to move into. So let's just say we move into this one. And now a third special, or a third movement point, I can use a special move to move into this adjacent space with a food cube and pick it up. So during all that, you're going to be picking up food cubes on your turn, in which case they're going to go on your player board in your mouth. As I just showed you, we pick up all these 3. And after your movement phase, you move on to digestion. During the digestion phase, if you have 3 or more points of food in your mouth, they stack up. So in this case, we got 2, 3, 4. So really, they would just stack up. Doesn't matter how many you get; they all stack up, and they move into your first space of your digestion track. All the other stacks will also move 1 space to the right. If any of them actually move off your board, it forms a poop cube. You put these back in the bag, and then you're going to take one of your poop cubes and place it on the table for next turn. Now you've increased your smell area. On these cards, there are food icons. If any time during your wander you flip one of these out, these stay out, and whenever there's 3 of these, it's going to trigger reloading the food on the board. So during your cleanup phase, if you did a wandering movement and end up with 3 of these showing, these all get shuffled back in, and then you're going to take the bag of food and you're going to fill in all the spaces that have a food icon that don't have them. After that, if you control the dingo, you're going to roll a die. He's going to move 1, 2, 3, or 4 spaces in the direction to the closest dingo, whether it's you or not. So in this case, we have him over here. If I was here and yellow was over here, we just count the spaces. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. He's going to move towards blue, 3 spaces. So 1, 2, 3. Now, if it was a tie, you get to pick or whatever. Once it moves on to a dingo, he's going to send him back to home, and you're going to give that player the dingo. That player on their next turn, in their cleanup phase, if the dingo's not on the board, they get to place it in one of the spaces marked with the dingo. And then on the following turn, if they already have the dingo on the board, then they get to roll the die and move it as well. That's pretty much the game. First player to get all 4 of their baby wombats back to home is the winner. And there are a couple of variants. Like I said, there are these printed boulders on here. These boulders will pretty much, they're blocking terrain. You can't move through them. You also can play with 2 dingoes. There's some rules for 5th player rules in there, but it doesn't come with the components. And finally, you know what? completely forgot about these, but special tiles. Each player gets 4 special tiles that they can use once per game. The first one is a hold it in. You basically flip it, and it'll stop your digestion tract from moving or coming off the board. You can flip this one over, and it returns you home, no matter where you're at, and including if you have a baby wombat with you. This one you can flip over to move just 1 space adjacent. And this one you can shift all your movement or digestion tract tiles that you have stacked up 1 space to the right to help further along, so you can release them on a future turn or release them that turn. These can only be used once a turn. They do not count as your movement, so you can do these in addition. You can technically do all 4 of them in one turn if you really wanted to, although you do get to use them once per game. So that's the game. Let me tell you what I think. And there you go, that's Wombat Rescue. Now, I'm going to say a couple of things I dislike about the game, but take this with a grain of salt, because it's really not as bad as what it's going to seem. One, I feel like the game has an anticlimactic, kind of like a fast-forward ending. Halfway through the game, you established your poop routes, and you just beeline it to the next baby and get back. And with the standard setup, the babies are really close to each other, so it's really not that hard just to go flying across the table. And unless you're playing with a lot of players, there's not a lot that players are going to do to stop you. Maybe they can poop in your path or get in your way and things like that. But unless you're already there, it's a waste of your time to kind of go that route to get there. Otherwise, if you're playing like 4 players, then one person has to sacrifice their win to try to stop the person who's ahead. I didn't like that so much. Maybe it would be cool if there was like a special ability that you could flip once to kind of throw a boulder out there or throw a piece of food. I mean, even if it's a piece of food, they get it, but it stops them in their tracks, essentially. Speaking of special abilities, the one I didn't like as much is the return home. I don't like the fact that you can return home with a baby, but at the same time, if you take it away, it's way less useful. I just feel like if there's one baby that's harder to get to than the rest, everybody kind of saves it for that, or they save it for the last baby wombat to bring back because they know everybody's going to try to get in their way and just stop them or whatever. So it is what it is. I think the special abilities are really, really cool. I like them a whole lot. I kind of wish there was more, and maybe you draw certain ones at the beginning of the game, like draw 4 of the 7, and then each player can only play with those 4. Everybody would get the same ones. I think that would be a cool optional rule. The optional rules are pretty cool. Some of them don't have components in the box, such as the 5th player and the boulders, although the boulders are really just going to sit on the spaces that are printed anyway, so you can play with that rule. But the 5th player, I had to look it up because I was like, I don't know why it didn't come with 5th player stuff, and it's on Board Game Geek, so I think it would be kind of fun with 5 players. The reason is because I feel like with 2 players, there's not enough player interaction or conflict. If you kind of go different routes, you almost need it to follow each other to kind of get in each other's way the whole time. But if you go off and start different routes, you're pretty much not really going to get to each other. So what we usually do is add in a second dingo, which I find amazing anyway, even though the rules are a little bit ambiguous, because you don't, not to go in deep of that, but if a dingo catches somebody, do you take them both off the board and give them to the other player? That's what we did. Maybe we did it wrong. I don't know. It's not a whole huge section on an additional dingo, but I thought it was awesome the way we played it anyway, so I'm going to continue to play it that way. And so otherwise, I do think that's a good game. I was way more surprised than I thought I would be, because I felt like it's more of an abstract game, and maybe in the way that stuff's happening, it kind of is. But the theme really piles onto this really well. I mean, the poop, it makes sense that everything kind of, and they explain it in the rules a little bit. I'm not usually a person on rules where they explain a rule and kind of tell you why it's a realistic rule. Like, oh, and the dingo he has to go back each turn because he has to go to his buddies and stuff. That's kind of funny, but some of them were like more specific. And I felt like it was just enough not to be annoying, such as some other games, but it was a clever little thing to add in there, because I felt like it brought the theme out, and I wasn't aware this game had as much theme as it actually did. So kudos to you. And if it looks interesting, definitely check it out. It's phenomenal components as always, Eagle-Gryphon. So thumbs up to that. Anyway, good game. There's just minor things, and I feel like you can house rule some of that to mitigate it. So if you have any questions, feel free to email me at timjennette@gmail.com over here. You can follow me on any of my social media down below. And also, I have a new podcast called Meeplecore, MEEPLECORE. You can go to meeplecore.com or search it on iTunes. It also is on YouTube as well in video form. So check that out. Let me know what you think. And until next time, keep on rocking and rolling dice.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.